Okay, so it is my distinct pleasure to once again introduce someone I have known for a whopping, I think it's been 3 hours at this point now. And I had the opportunity to talk to Don this morning and got some interesting facts about him. As you're watching his presentation about how to convince a healthcare CFO to do anything, ever, I think a topic which is near and dear to all of our hearts, please keep in mind that he sings with the Mormon Tabernacle Choir and begin to, accumulate your requests for songs at the end of the Q&A. He sung with James Taylor, so that is my big intro and his claim to fame. Yeah, outside of being a successful businessman in this space and who is also an expert in marketing in this space and in convincing CFOs on how to go ahead and sign the dotted line for the marketing budgets. He's a rock star. So welcome, Don.
Oh, thank you. I was a rock star. Well, don't go too far. It is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be in front of you and to be talking about this topic and just really to be interacting with all of you guys. It's a ton of fun to be with like-minded people. So kudos to John and Csuite for making this happen. So great stuff. We're talking about reaching and persuading the healthcare CFO. And we talk about being an expert. Manny introduced me as an expert, and I have experience. And I think that a lot of you guys do too. And so I don't want to stand up here and talk about myself like I'm the end-all be-all and that I've got this peg, but I do have some experience. And I hope that we can share our experiences together. So who counts the CFO as primary target? Healthcare CFO, most of the room. So we probably had some experience, both good and bad. And so let's make this a good conversation. I'm glad that we have an intimate group here. So let's make that happen. So I think whenever we talk about reaching the healthcare CFO, we need to think about how we approach it. What kind of marketer we really are. I'm of the opinion that the traditional view of a marketer may not be the right way to go when it comes to reaching someone as high level as this. And so a lot of times we think about marketers as the great white hunter. When you Google image a great white hunter, you get Clark Gable. So what's the image of the great white hunter? He's cool, he's suave, he really knows what he's doing, and he's going to take care of it. He can do it alone. He's this lone, solitary guy, and him and his gun are going to make it happen. We have a lot of hunting metaphors in marketing, and we use a lot of different kind of violent metaphors in marketing. Sometimes it has to do with war, but hunting is a little less violent, but it's still, you're using guns. So we talk about targets. Our targets are the person that we hope will become a customer. They're our targets. They're the ones we're pointing the gun at. We track. When we track our targets, we love to stay on top of web analytics. We love to stay on top of our marketing automation tools that tell us when someone's putting their little tracks in our website. And that's the way we track our friends, the CFOs. We use lures. We use whatever premiums we use to target them. So we've got our case studies. We've got our white papers. We've got things that they can't seem to do without. So where we can track them and capture them. We aim. So we get the target in our crosshairs. And we blast. Isn't that a great term to use? We blast our audience, our targets, so that maybe we don't kill them, but we try to capture them and try to scare them into, not scare them, but I think you guys get the point. Let's talk about the hunted, our prey. Anyone know this guy? He's not well known, but whenever you Google, when I Googled hospital CFO, I came up with this guy. This guy's Ben's a guy who's scrubbed behind the ears, and he's a newly minted CFO at some system in Texas. And this is the guy we want to reach, right? This is our target. So how do we target him? Well, we got to know who he is. We got to know what he's about. So we know his location. We know that he's in Texas. But typically, our prey is the U.S. healthcare industry. We don't go outside of the United States. Within the healthcare industry, we know that they have certain habitats. They're either in payer or provider organizations. They love the boardroom. They love the corner office, right? What's their status? Well, they're rare, right? There aren't many of them. We estimate that there's probably less than 5,000 of them in the U.S. healthcare industry, and they're honestly really hard to get to. They're protected. They're a protected species. They're protected by multiple admins who answer their phones, usually answer their emails. I don't know if anyone else has had this experience. I worked for a provider organization for a while, and I actually worked with CFOs directly. And the top CFO of the healthcare system sent me an email one time, and I did not recognize the email address. It wasn't like my email address, don.seamons@healthsystem.org or whatever. It was, dl1492@healthsystem.org. So I found out that was the email that I needed to send to him to use if I ever wanted to get him to respond to me. And they have secret cell numbers. So if you get that great cell number, you got 5 seconds until they realize, hey, this really isn't a person that I know and trust. But if you get that 5 seconds, use it well. And they love their smartphone and they love their spreadsheet. So now that we know all that there is to know about our friends, the healthcare CFO, we've got him in our crosshairs, right? We've targeted him. We're going to blast him. He's going to become ours. Shoot him with a tranquilizer gun. We're not going to hurt him, right? So, folks, the truth of the matter is that CFOs will not be hunted. This metaphor doesn't work when we try to reach out to the healthcare CFO. Anyone else had experience like this? When we try to use typical B2C type of tactics, it doesn't go over very well. So, it does work in B2C. There's a reason why we use these metaphors, because this kind of targeting and this kind of thought process does work. And it does work in some B2B instances where it's a transactional kind of a sale, where you can use your credit card to pay for something. But when we have sales cycles that are 6 to 24 months long, and when there's lots of negotiations, and when the prices are in the 6 figures and sometimes 7 figures, we really need to think about it in a different way. You guys recognize this lady? She's fairly recognizable. Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall spent 45 years studying chimpanzees in Tanzania, and has been well recognized for her efforts. She's found out in my little Wikipedia research that she's one of the only people who has received a doctorate degree, an actual doctorate degree, without receiving a bachelor's degree. How about that? She got a doctorate degree from Oxford based on her research in Tanzania from 1960 to 1965, and has done so much to help people understand the relationship that primates have with humans. She actually got into a troop of chimpanzees, and she named them, which was radical. You don't name chimpanzees in 1960. You number them. But she named them, and she gave them personality. Well, she didn't really give them personality. She knows that they had personalities, and she described those personalities. And she actually became part of their troop. She was the least female in that troop for, I'm not sure how many years, but eventually one of the alpha males kicked her out. But the point that I'm bringing up with Jane is that she wasn't a hunter. She was an observer. She observed and she found out everything that she could about these chimpanzees, and has done so much good because of that. And I think that's what we need to do as marketers, is we need to be observers. We need to be observers of CFOs. I just attended Beth's presentation, and she talks to healthcare decision makers all the time and gets some good information about them. I think that's a great way to go. So let's talk about CFOs. Just like we're a lot like chimpanzees, people and chimpanzees are a lot alike. Marketers and CFOs are a lot alike, and I'm going to let you guys distinguish who's the human and who's the chimpanzee here. But we are a lot like each other. We are focused on revenue, right? That is a concern for marketers and for CFOs. We are driven by performance. Absolutely, we need to be driven by performance in order to justify the amount of money that CFOs spend on marketing. And we're concerned with numbers. We have various metrics that we use. We're really nothing like them. All right, we do have some similarities, but there's a lot of differences. Talking about those specific similarities that we just brought up, we're concerned about marketing-generated revenue. We're concerned about justifying what people spend on marketing and showing that there's an ROI with marketing, and that's important. They're concerned about corporate revenue. They're concerned about the whole shooting match. We are concerned about performance because it determines how well we're perceived in the company. It determines our raise, sometimes it determines our promotion, and sometimes it determines whether we keep our jobs or not, which is important. They're concerned about performance because it affects not only their jobs, but it affects others' jobs. It affects whether the lights stay on. It affects whether the doors stay open. Revenue performance is quite a bit different for us versus them. Here are our metrics. Reach, frequency, circulation. We talk about branding and awareness. And I don't know if anyone else has talked about branding and awareness to CFOs or to any kind of finance types, but those numbers drive them crazy because they're fuzzy numbers and they're really hard to quantify. But these are the numbers that they worry about: assets and liabilities, profit and loss. The bottom line, their bottom line is the bottom line. So here are some of my observations on CFOs, and I would love to hear anyone else's observations as well, because I'm sure that there's probably some complementary observations there. CFOs are capitalists at heart. I talked to some hospital CFOs, and here's what they tell me are the most important thing about what they think about on a daily basis. I'm thinking about the hospital CFO, and there's other healthcare type CFOs, but because most of them live in the hospital, we're going to think about it from that perspective. What's our cash position? How much cash flow do we have? If we don't have enough cash flow, how are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to pay our employees? How are we going to keep the lights on and the doors open? Next question that they have is, what's our patient volume? Now, CFOs that aren't in the hospital situation think about it from a different perspective, but they all think about, how are we making money? More volume. Right now in the healthcare system, volume equals cash. And eventually that's not going to be the case, right? May that day come sooner than later. But the more volume that they have, the more money that they bring in. And then it's up to them to keep the revenue cycle going and actually not only have patient volume, but make that volume turn into volume. Next question that they ask themselves on a daily basis is, how do I reduce expenses? It's not just about improving the amount of revenue that they bring in. They also want to, that balance sheet includes not only revenue, but assets. I'm sorry, not assets, but liabilities. So how can we decrease the amount of money that we spend on our liabilities? The biggest expense that they have is labor expense. And so they want to make sure that they're right-sized. So they work with HR a lot on that regard. But they also want to make sure, especially in a hospital situation, that they're not paying too much for supplies. So you've got group purchasing organizations that have taken over healthcare for the last couple of decades, and that's not only happening for hard supplies, but it's happening with software, it's happening with services. The more or the fewer vendors that they can have, that they can sell to, the greater buying power that they have. If you decrease their suppliers from 5 to 1, you can say, hey, one supplier, I'm going to give you the business of 5 suppliers, so you got to give me a better deal, a better rate. So they're capitalists. CFOs are entrepreneurs. It's not just bean counting. It's not just the balance sheets, the assets, and the liabilities. They really want to bring in more business, and they do. They think about that on a regular basis. So how do I diversify my product mix? Is another question that they ask themselves. So the hospital in my neighborhood, in my county, there's a bunch of other hospitals in the county, but the biggest hospital in the county makes a lot of money on maternity. I live in Utah, and I have 4 children, and I'm a normal person in Utah with 4 children. That's about the median number of children in my county anyway. So this hospital makes lots of money on babies, and I've given them a lot of my money. But at some point, we're going to stop having babies. I'm past my prime childbearing age, and so is my wife, and we're good with 4. So at some point, they're going to have to diversify their product mix so that old people like me, when I get older and retire, I'm going to need my knee done. I'm going to need some geriatric work of some sort, and I hope I don't really know what that is right now, but at some point I'm going to have to figure it out. So they'll have to diversify how they make money. And that's the same for every hospital. What happens when there's an economic downturn and we don't have people doing knee replacements or elective surgeries, elective orthopedic surgeries? What can I do to diversify my product mix so that if there is a downturn in one area, I can increase it in another area? They also think about revenue streams. How can they find new revenue streams? Now again, this is one of the problems with healthcare right now, where we have volume driving the mix. And so CFOs really care about that. How can we increase patient volume? What kind of services can I provide that maybe no one else provides that is going to bring more people into my hospital? So they think about the ROI of bringing a new MRI machine, a 64-slice MRI machine. And they know that if they have the latest technology with MRIs, doctors are going to send them more MRI work. That just happens. They also know that if they buy a robot, I don't know if this is the way it is right now. I don't think that the Da Vinci robots are really hot. But it used to be that if you bought a Da Vinci robot, your volume would increase. Not because people were getting surgeries by this robot, but because they said, oh, God, this hospital is at the cutting edge of technology, and I'm going to go there. This is where I want to go. So they talk about hyperbaric chambers and bariatric surgery and different things that they can use to drive a little bit more volume. So they're entrepreneurs. Another thing that they are is they're leaders. Can't forget the fact that these guys aren't just numbers guys, and they aren't just money guys. They actually are leaders of large groups of people. So one way they're leaders, they ask themselves this question. These are questions that we all should ask ourselves. How can I accomplish my organizational goals? As a CFO, as someone who controls the money, someone who controls the spend, they can do a lot to help organizations accomplish their financial goals and also accomplish other goals financially, if that makes sense. And I'll have an example coming up with you. They also ask themselves, how can I inspire my employees to help achieve? I can't do everything as the CFO. How can I inspire my employees to do what they need to do? So a couple of stories. We know of a hospital CFO, actually a system CFO that one of my writers knows personally, who is the head CFO in Oregon. And she said, this person is your typical CFO. She's a hard charger. She never reads email. She never answers the phone. She, anytime you want to spend money, she pokes holes in it. She pokes holes in any proposal that's out there. It's incredibly difficult to get her to spend any money. Okay, that's how CFOs, just kind of like what Mandy was saying. How do you get them to do anything? Well, if she also said that this person is, one of her KPIs is meeting the AAA. Isn't it interesting that healthcare CFO is focused on that specific KPI? We all know what the AAA is, right? Anyone not know what the AAA is that we need to? Okay. All right, so you probably know, but you're just letting other people. Okay, Institute for Healthcare Improvement is run by the former, actually started by a former CMS administrator. Yeah, he started it before he ran CMS. Does anyone know
Don Berwick.
Thank you, Don Berwick. So Don Berwick started, I think he's at Harvard, started the Institute for Healthcare Improvement.
He's running for governor in Massachusetts.
Right. He'd be great. He'd be great. So they came up with, and this is genius because it's simple. The healthcare system is broken because of 3 reasons. The costs too much. Quality's not great. We have average quality for the amount of money we spend, and patients aren't really satisfied. So the triple aim for hospitals, or for the healthcare system in general, is to improve quality, to decrease costs, and to increase satisfaction, patient satisfaction. So how do we do that triple aim? And these are all interrelated, right? Cost and quality are interrelated, and satisfaction is based on, hey, gosh, did I get better? Did my grandma get better? Did I get bankrupted because they got better? You know, so they're all interrelated. So this system is actually a strategic partner with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and everyone, not just the CFO, but the CEO, everyone in the C-suite, all their VPs, all their managers, all their directors have as their key performance indicators, how am I accomplishing the triple aim? What am I doing to help my organization decrease costs, improve quality, increase patient satisfaction? So if you knew that about that CFO, that's an in. That's something that you, I don't know if you can take it to the bank, but it's something that you can use. Put it this way: if you try to reach that CFO and don't talk about the triple aim, you're gone. If you got that CFO cell phone number and in 5 seconds you don't mention the triple aim, you're toast. But if you mention the triple aim, it might work. Oh, I'm going to back up. How could I inspire my employees? The same hospital that I mentioned in my county, in my city actually, heard the CEO talk about a CFO that he had hired at one point. And he only lasted for 3 or 4 months, and here's the reason why. The hospital had a drill, as hospitals sometimes do, where you need to do fire drills, or there needs to be an evacuation. Well, this is an evacuation kind of a drill. The CFO knew that it was going to happen. So the alarm sounded, and everyone went to their designated places for the evacuation. And everyone went to the parking lot, probably. So they all went to the parking lot and tried to regroup and tried to figure out, okay, what do we do with our patients? What do we do with our employees? What's the next step for us if we have to get evacuated? So everyone shows up at the executive spot, the predetermined spot, but the CFO's not there. Because the CFO couldn't be bothered. The CFO knew all sorts of stuff. He was ready to be a CFO from a financial standpoint. He was a great capitalist. He was a great entrepreneur, but he was not a good leader because he didn't think that he mattered, that he had anything to do with hospital evacuation. Well, he got fired the next day. Done. Because he was a leader. He didn't understand that he was a leader of people. And whether he had anything to say about this or not, he needed to be visible. He needed the people, the employees, to see him with the hospital executives. So the good CFOs are leaders. They're also humans. Now we've had a lot of talk. I've talked a lot anyway about how difficult it is to reach them and how difficult they are to persuade. But they are not robots. They can be persuaded because marketing works because it's persuasive. So we can persuade them. So there's a couple of things that we need to think about at all times. One is that we need to do our homework. If we don't know that this hospital system in Oregon is focused on the triple aim, then we're done. We need to do our homework not just on the system, but we need to do as much homework as we possibly can on the individuals. Like I said, these guys are rare species. There aren't many of them. So take the time to do your homework about them specifically. And there's a lot of ways that we can do that. Match your value with his goals. Once you've done your homework, once you understand what that person really cares about, then you got to do the messaging work. Make the messaging happen. Share success stories. CFOs that I've spoken with said, hey, you know what, if I do happen to talk to a salesperson and they don't give me references and they don't show me proof that what they do can work not only for me, but for someone else who's like me, then it's over. So share success stories with them. If you don't have success stories, you gotta get them. Yeah, you gotta find them. You can't make it up. You can't just pull it out of the air. But there's obviously ways to.
Got it all wrong.
Mandy,
Yeah,
stop.
really. Mandy was already going, wow, a whole new business. I can make up stories.
And the final one is don't go alone. We're not the great white hunter. We don't have all the answers. A marketing-focused campaign or a marketing-led campaign, let me rephrase this. A campaign where marketing doesn't involve anyone else but marketing is going to fall flat on its face. It'll never work. We'll talk about that. So keys to successful campaigns, I think they're top-down. Organizations that have an executive sponsor and that make this a corporate campaign and not a marketing campaign are going to be successful. They're long-term. Can't just be an ad or two in HFMA. And it can't just be advertising in HFMA. It's got to be long-term, and it also has to be multiple touch points. And then the final one is you need to involve more than just marketing. So let's talk about that. In order to get to this spot, we need to involve the C-suite. Every campaign, every successful CFO-focused campaign that I've been involved in has had an executive sponsor. Now, what do? They're not necessarily marketers, but they can rally the troops. If you're not going to involve, it's not going to be just the C-suite and marketing. There's going to be other organizations, other departments as part of your organizations involved. So they need to make sure, if they are involved, the C-suite executive, the sponsor, can make sure that they actually give you what you need. If you try to involve them without an executive sponsor, it's going to be difficult to get them to pay any attention to you because they have other priorities. That's not their only role. Sponsorship and alignment. They also need to be involved from maybe a sales standpoint, a business development standpoint. The fact is, we're not like CFOs, and we don't speak their language. And even if we learn their language and try to speak it to them, they're going to look at our credential and they're going to look at our title and say, "What do you know? What do you know about this?" But if you get an executive who has the right credentials, who has the right experience, and who doesn't just learn their language but knows their language by heart, then that can make a big difference. The next is you need to have someone involved who has a planning and budgeting function. Now, in your organization, it may be that you call them an analyst, or I'm not sure what. There's plenty of other titles that they have. But someone in finance who can help you do some financial matchmaking, so who can say, based on how much we've sold right now, based on what we know about our customers, and maybe this is a marketing person, someone who does marketing operations, we know that they have, you have to be a certain size and have a certain amount of revenue to be able to buy our product. And so let's help you hone down. We're not going to try to reach out to 5,000 CFOs or 5,000 organizations. Let's hone it down. Let's get it down to 500. Let's get it down to 50. Because the more targeted you can be, the better off you can be. So they can help with that. Someone who's a business analyst. Deal structuring is very important as well. Because you've got a six-figure sale, there's going to be some back and forth. It's not going to be, hey, this is what we want you to pay, take it or leave it. That's one of the reasons why the sales cycles are so long. So if you've got a corporate campaign happening, try to get the analysts involved so that they can say, okay, sales, you want to start here, but this is as far as we can go. And if we can get more seats or more volume, more hospitals, you've got a bigger system, and we can go down even further. Someone who can help structure that deal from the top. Obviously, we want to get sales. Sales is critical. They're going to be the main point of contact for this campaign. They can do firsthand research. Please talk to your salespeople. They talk to these targets all the time. They may actually talk to CFOs on a regular basis. And if they don't talk to CFOs on a regular basis, they may talk to their direct reports. So they can understand a lot about what is important to that organization and how to target. And they can help stage the contact. They can say, hey, you know what, we've got this person, and they're maybe a stage 2. This organization, we've been trying to get into them for a while. They're a stage 1. And they can help you understand that so you can direct your marketing very focused on that. And then finally, obviously, marketing is going to be involved. Marketing can be in charge of the secondhand research. Marketing is going to be, with the help of sales, with the help of the executives, going to focus on messaging. They'll be doing the campaign management. Really, at its core, when you do this kind of a campaign and this marketing campaign, so you don't want to trust. Sales doesn't do campaign management. They don't do project management. And your CEO isn't going to do project management either. That's going to be your job. And then you're going to be developing the deliverables. All the stuff that marketing typically does, you're going to do. All right. So what's the marketing mix? This might be the $64,000 question. This isn't the end-all be-all, like I said. These are just some things that have worked. One of the things that is critical for your CEO to understand is that if you don't have a brand, it's not going to, all this other stuff isn't going to work. You're not going to get the attention paid to you that you need if you aren't known. You could have the greatest widget in the world, you could have the greatest services in the world, but you've got to have a brand in order to make a difference. Trade shows are critically important. HITMC, as you are probably all aware, is a great show for CFOs. They have regional shows where you can reach out to CFOs on a more intimate basis. So take advantage of regional and state shows. Sponsor. Again, this is more has to do with branding. The sponsorship part of it does to get your name out in front of these people. Dimensional direct mail. Now, why is it dimensional? Because postcards don't work. Letters typically don't work. If you really want to reach someone that high of a level and you really want to grab their attention, dimensional, it's great. It works if you do something really creative. You can do something to grab their attention, and you can get some really good results. It's expensive. All this stuff is expensive, and that's part of the problem. That's why it's difficult. One of the reasons why it's difficult to reach the CFO, because you have to spend some money.
It's like being in Vegas, it's all cash.
You do take a risk. You do take a risk. Go ahead.
But to your point about, especially with the dimensional direct mail campaign, we've done a few of those successfully in the past, where instead of blasting out to all the ANI attendees, we picked 50.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you really fine-tune the organizations that can afford your product, that need your product, you really identify those targets.
So when you spend that money, it's not good money after that. But to your point, tell me your name.
Deanna.
Deanna, I think you're right. It's a risk. Spending this money, you might not get a return out of it. But if you do the groundwork, if you do the legwork, I think there's a pretty good chance. There's a really good chance, actually, that it's going to turn out well. Some of the new content marketing is a fairly new thing. And you may wonder whether that's going to work for CFOs. In my experience, my recent experience, it has. Content marketing is helpful. It's not the only thing. You can't just do content marketing and reach the CFO or anyone in the C-suite, really. But it is important to do. They do read white papers. They do read case studies. Case studies, like I said, you got to have proof. Case studies are proof. Landing pages, premiums. That's another way to. You've got your content. How are you going to get it out? Use some email marketing. Use some LinkedIn work, and bring people to the landing page and give them premiums. Really give them a reason to give you their information. And then this is a critical point, I think. You can do all this stuff, all 5 of those first things, and if you don't do telemarketing in some way, it might not be using an agency to do telemarketing, but if you don't do a follow-up phone call with your inside sales team or someone else, really, that's where you're flushing money down the toilet, really. Again, I've never had an experience with this kind of a campaign where if you didn't have where telemarketing wasn't part of it. A successful campaign does need to have some kind of telemarketing component. And I see lots of headhunting, so that's great to me. So, let's talk about what's worked. And I'd like to know what's worked for you guys too, but I'm going to, in my experience, talk about a little bit of case studies. So we had a client who was trying to replace some software, and they had market share that was in the 2 or 3% range, and they had a competitor whose market share was through the roof. And so, really, if they could get a 0.5% increase in market share, they do great. So we did this. This campaign was started by the leader of a business unit within the organization, and that organization drafted sales. That guy, the person who led the campaign, drafted sales, drafted marketing, drafted the analysts, and said, "This is how we're going to all work together, and we're going to do a full court press on these guys." We had From the marketing standpoint, we had advertising, we had an email landing page. Obviously, we did telemarketing. There was some sales support, and the result quickly was a 300% increase in leads. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was an ACO product launch, where an organization did some great upfront research, found out all that they could about the C-suite that they were reaching out to. It wasn't just CFOs, it was CMOs, it was CMIOs, and CIOs, and developed lots of content, developed a microsite, banner ads, email, trade show. They spent about $1 million on that, but look at what they got out of it. Because they did all the groundwork, they did all the research, they involved multiple departments within the organization. They were able to get $52 million in TCV. So that's what's a 5,200% ROI. So there was some investment there, but they also did get the ROI. And
Question.
sure.
Was this a like a hospital system sponsored ACO, or was it a physician network, physician lab?
They reached out to organizations that were known ACOs. So they were part of the Medicare Shared Savings Program, or they were a Pioneer ACO.
Oh, Pioneer.
So yeah, they had the MSSP plus the Pioneer, and they were able to focus on those. There's 300 organizations that are like that right now, and there were fewer when this campaign started, but they were very, very focused on trying to reach that. So they knew their audience. They knew that it was pretty easy to find. It's public information that all these organizations are part of the MSSP. So yeah, they did some very, very. They were very targeted, but they also really got to know their audience really well. And this works. We're in Vegas. It is a little bit of a crapshoot. Anytime you spend money on marketing, it's going to be a risk. But it's been my experience, and I'm sure with all the head nodding that we have, there's going to be a lot of you have had this experience too, where this kind of stuff works. So let's have a discussion. What's worked for you? Anyone? Any good experiences with CFOs, or has any of this not worked for you? You want to say something, Andy?
I have lots of questions, but I always have lots of questions. So I want to give other people an opportunity to speak.
You can start.
Okay.
Okay, gentleman in the back.
Our target audience is usually the CIO.
Okay. All right. So a lot of this applies.
Right. But as BI, data analytics becomes more of a factor, the CFO and the CEO definitely become our target audience at that point. So what we have found that's worked very well for the CIO is being involved in organizations that you can get one-on-one face time, such as Csuite. That has been a very valuable relationship, because you can develop those relationships. You have to have relationships with the C-suite. You can't just call on them. You develop friendships and relationships over time. Are there any organizations like that for the CFO or for the CEO?
Yes, and it's been my experience that HFMA is really the premier organization, and they know it.
Yeah, they do.
Don't they, Kringware, right?
Yes.
Anne Marie?
Yes.
Yeah, they know it, and you spend dearly.
I spend
in front of
a
them.
lot of money. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what's the ROI?
I get asked that quite frequently by my CFO. It's really interesting because our target market is the CFO, and we certainly our users. I guess there are a million things that we found out about trying to reach this audience, but if you look at our users are usually the people that our users or their bosses are the ones that take this to the CFO. So we really have to do both sides. And I know you're not advocating, you only go to one group, but
Right.
You have to really convince them on the user level, hey, this product is great for you, you're going to love it, it's going to be easy to use, all those things.
Yeah.
And they take it to the CFO for them to actually sign off on it. However, what we found is as Kramer has grown, we're about a 15-year-old company, we've gone from one product to 11. If we can get to the CFO, and I will have to say to me, our salespeople are really key in doing this.
Mhm.
If they can tell the story to the CFO wants to buy all of our products. I mean, they'll be like, yeah, we want to sign up for all of it. If you talk to the users, they're like, well, I just want this one. Don't bother me about all this other stuff. So we, as a marketing team, we really are, we have to work harder to get into the mind of the CFO, and we're always being asked, well, what's our messaging to the CFO? And, so I do think we struggle with making sure we can speak the language of the CFO. ROI, you didn't really talk about ROI, but we're always asked for ROI numbers, and CFOs are always wanting to know what's the justification for this.
That's right.
I
That's
think
the proof point, right?
that can be a tough one, because I think sometimes people just look at the real hard dollar ROIs and they don't look at how you mitigate risk. So what is it that you're missing? If what kind of risk balance are we not having to pay for some of this stuff, but also the operational efficiency. And I know these are all things that you can measure, but trying to really get to it and make sure you can measure that. So we have, we're lucky because we have a lot of experience. We have, 1,200 clients and more that we implement every day. So we do have great stories to tell. And, for us, I think we're still trying to figure out what is the right combination. But it's interesting. It depends on, we sell everything from a small critical access hospital to the largest IDNs. So we actually will get a CFO to sign up for a webinar, but they may be from a smaller hospital or a critical access hospital. The really large, I don't know that we talk very often to the really large CFOs in these huge hospitals. They're kind of untouchable, except where we do, our strategy has been to go directly to building, to me it's a relationship.
Mhm.
And so we do have different vehicles by which we just focus on executive relationships, and it's not about doing a lot of the direct mail and do all that. It's about going to, we go to the Community Hospital 100 conference, and you go and you actually take your executives there, and we meet and talk to other executives and we build a relationship. We're part of the Health Academy, and they have the top CFOs and other executives from the IDN industry. So it's like we try to find those C-level events, and HFMA used to have a leadership event, and I'm trying to think what we did last year. They quit doing their CFO forum, and I think it's because CFOs weren't going.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What have you guys done? Anything that you thought was really worked really well?
Well, my clients have always said that they like, for HFMA, they like to your point about developing relationships, they like the regionals better. There's 11 regions, right?
Yeah.
And especially around, to the point that I know with CFOs, a lot of it's peer-to-peer, right? There's a real strong, good old boys and gals club in the CFO suite. So, if you've got an area in the country where you've got some good clients, focus on that regional HFMA, right? With sponsorship, with booth, with speaking, with, just be there to develop those relationships. But don't expect results in the first year.
Yeah.
I think it takes, it takes time, right? You have to do it several years in a row. And then I love the boutique C-suite ones. Health Leaders has one.
Yeah.
Modern Healthcare does theirs with American Hospital Association leadership. I think those leadership ones are really good.
Yeah.
Those boutique kind of leadership ones.
But the thing is, and I think to the point you've made, part of what we have struggled with, you have to have people who can then hold their own in a conversation with the CFO. So we do have an inside marketing team, but we make the territory sales managers call the CFOs, not the inside team, because A, they should be building a relationship with them, and B, they should be able to have the cachet to have that conversation. Now, all of them don't feel comfortable with that, but we have to work on that. But it's really important that you have the kind of people that you can take to these events and that feel comfortable networking and feeling like they can have a conversation.
Anyone done internal events? Have you used internal events?
That's something when Beth was talking about, we've talked about it.
Uh-huh.
Our user group this year, we are for the first time going to develop this leadership track.
Executive
Now,
forum.
we're not going to try to go for the CFO the first time. We're going to go probably for the director and VP level, and have something special for them. We may get some CFOs that
Sure.
might get interested. But I think that's a long-term strategy to kind of really get them to come to something. I think I would like to look at some more CFO networking events to do that. But also, I think one of the things we wanted to try was like the breakfast or dinner, maybe not even dinner, but just drinks or something, where you have a thought leadership topic and you do it regionally. You know, you have one in New York City at the Ritz-Carlton,
Yeah.
and you say, come and listen to this topic and have some drinks.
Do a round table.
And I'd really like to see how that goes, because I do think that kind of thing, not getting, they don't have to commit 3 days, they don't have to do, that they might come to something like that. But
Especially
we
if it's a
haven't
really good speaker,
tried it
right?
yet. Yeah, and I mean we're lucky we have some good folks in our own organization that can do that. So I think that's something interesting. But there's also great people all over the industry, and HFMA can help you.
Great.
I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
I go back a couple of decades in the hospital, health plan, medical group, health system world, touch points in community hospital settings, academic, proprietary, and faith-based, across them all.
Okay.
Touch points in all those settings. We're just now at a standpoint where there's some kind of equilibrium coming together in terms of the operational cohesion or coherence in the C-suite, and the one knocking on the door is now the CMIO or the CIO. They're elevated. They're sort of starting to engage in the culture of the C-suite. Before that one, it was the CFO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
The CFO was the king of no. They
Yeah.
they would always say no. CMO, if there was a chief marketing officer or a chief contracting, director of contracting, or chief contracting officer, always at loggerheads. And then the CEO is kind of the arbitrator. But the thing you touched on for me that is the most significant, that has significant strategic implications, is the triple aim as part of the KPI mix now. And it then becomes the relative weighting of how important the triple aim is, because it takes the CFO out of the single card they ever plays. No spend money, nada. But now they have to think much more broadly about better quality, better experience, lower per capita cost. That puts them in a completely different thinking mindset. So I just want to say, just to understand the dynamics, that's huge.
Okay.
That is huge, because they're gonna have to be more strategic than just strictly operational.
Yeah, that's right. They need to know how they can improve quality. How does a finance guy improve quality? Well,
And how do I do all this and lower aggregate spending?
Right.
Yeah, that's
You know,
yeah.
I
That's a
mean,
good
yeah.
one. And I mean, I do think it was, at least, especially for our business, the whole article about the bitter pill, as in some ways offensive as that article was, and incorrect in so many areas, but it actually was good in a way, because it brought up a lot of attention to the fact that if CFOs don't know how their own hospital charges for things, and they don't know what a charge master is, and they can't explain to a patient why they're charging certain things, I mean, all of a sudden CFOs are going to have to care about, because their boards care about, patients coming and screaming about their bills and being able to explain why is this cost this much, and those kind of things. So I know for us, for our business, where we create that visibility for them, it's really kind of helped us, because before it was like, don't talk to me, go talk to my people, they do that.
Yeah.
And now I think
Right.
they're like, oh no, I do
Nowhere
need
to
to
hide.
talk to you about that. Because I could get called on by some journalist, and I'm going to have to answer the
CNN on the
question.
phone.
Right, yeah.
It's hard for us laymen to understand. Maybe put it
I
Yeah.
sit through this, and we don't deal with hospitals, we're an ambulatory.
Okay.
But to me, my CFO is also my user, it's that doctor who owns that practice.
Yeah, right, okay.
He's spending the cash, whether it's one solo or 10 group or 50, right? And so they're also users. And so where do you engage them? Are you talking at them at the financial those things that are important, or do you engage them as the users because they're also going to be on board with how it's implemented and how it's affecting their staff, and they're engaged more than a CFO because they do know how their business works. They do know how they charge because they're charging. So it's tough to
Yeah.
direct your pieces in, without sounding too much. Like you start to get too
Everything.
much verbose, you know, everything's in there. Oh, we're gonna talk about money, we're gonna talk about this, we're gonna talk about that. Now you're like, holy shit, you know, you just overwhelm them and they're turning you off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's a good messaging question. Interesting.
And that could be part of your own answer though. If, for that individual physician practice, they are being inundated with having to take care of the books, take care of the patients, take care of all the factors there. So any way that you can, the message that you can give them that you can take some of that off their
Spin
shoulders,
ease into their
Simplify.
day, right?
use that while enabling them to take better care of the patients.
You're right.
Resume.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah, that's true. Simplify. Right? That works in a lot of cases. Any other thoughts or questions, or you haven't said anything?
Oh, well, this was such a great conversation, and my question is probably a broader one, and we might get into it more over lunch or happy hour. How much, honestly, when you're dealing with the C-suite, how many purchasing decisions are made based on, the efficacy of a marketing campaign, and how many are made based on the relationship? So, I mean, in my experience, and granted, I'm not a marketing or PR person, outside of the fact that I just kind of represent myself, but I watch how the C-suite seems to make decisions, and perhaps it's just because I'm in the South, the operation seems to be purely relationship-based. And it doesn't necessarily matter whether that person that they're hiring has any idea whatsoever about how to execute the thing that they're being handed. It's purely relationship-based. So I do wonder, do you encounter that, and how do you overcome that? Because that, to me, that would be, even beyond all of the, making sure that you do have an appropriate strategy, that's the single biggest obstacle to overcome, is who is entrenched in a relationship, and how do you ensure that the relationship isn't the biggest factor in the decision-making process, or how do you get to the no immediately and understand, hey, this guy's only going to hire his brother or his sister or his, girlfriend's brother's wife or whatever, and
Take them off your list.
yeah.
Sometimes you have to do that. That campaign that I mentioned, where we had the 300% increase, that was the kind of thing that we were up against. We were up against a group that did great in developing relationships and had long-term relationships with those that we were trying to boot out. And to be honest with you, that's the reason why we went after the CFOs, because the relationships were at a lower level. So we were trying to develop relationships, start relationships with that higher level of the CFO. But it is. You're right. I don't think that we can discount relationships at all. In fact, Anne-Marie mentioned that's where it all starts.
Just a recommendation, we've spoken about LinkedIn. Go on to LinkedIn and look at that CFO and see if you have any connections. If there's, a way in right there, if you have a mutual friend or work with a mutual organization, that right there is a personal connection that you can.
Leverage your salespeople, leverage your C-suite. And a lot of times in vendor organizations, they come from a provider type of environment.
I don't know, I've been in healthcare for way too long, so I don't know about the other industries, but I do know that in all the different, I've sold payer stuff and physician stuff and hospital stuff and stuff to pharmaceutical manufacturers, but especially in the hospital market space, it's about the relationship.
Right.
So I do think there are people out there that still want the proof points. So I think you do have to have materials that justify their decision, but you are going to get in, or you're going to get raised on top of the list because of the relationship. And as Beth says, if you get recommended, the first thing people do is the CFO calls, my neighbor CFO and says, "Who do you use? Who do you use?" And they find out who people use, and then they put it on the list. That doesn't mean you never get looked at, but you better have somebody in there building that relationship, and you better have some great proof points. So if you don't have that good relationship, you can really convince them. It would take a strong case to convince them to move away from that because it's a relationship business.
Yeah, I guess you could say that if there is a one thing, the relationship is the one thing. We can't discount any of this other thing. We can't discount any of the sales and the marketing and but you do have to develop relationships. And if you don't have those and you just rely on, just strict marketing and sales, then it's going to be difficult.
And in that regard, just leverage your best customers, right? So, maybe you only have one or two strong CFO relationships in the whole nation. That's okay. Use the ones you have
That's right.
to get new ones.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. It's
Thank
been
you.
wonderful to have a conversation.